My name is Amy Agent. So I work for the UK CAA, and I have been there for about 11 years now. So I've seen it transition through some interesting times in industry, and COVID has probably been one of the most interesting times. But my role actually at the moment is Stakeholder Engagement and Communications Manager for our Safety and Airspace Regulation Group. So that's just one section of the Civil Aviation Authority, and that's about 450 staff members work in that area. And in that area, we cover flight operations, airworthiness, we cover aerodromes, airports, and airspace. We cover general aviation, and we cover drones and medical. So the medical's for pilots predominantly. So it's quite a vast department, and quite a lot of those roles are specific roles. So they are, ex-engineers, ex-pilots. Some of them are still current pilots. Some of them are still current engineers. Some of them are doctors. They all come from quite specific backgrounds in terms of their roles prior to joining the authority, and that obviously is because of the roles they then do within the authority. So quite a few of those roles, they will go out and about, and they are regulating basically the airspace, and that's our role. So to make sure that consumers are safe when they're going flying, and make sure the airlines, the little flying schools, the aerodromes, the airspace are all regulated in accordance with the ICAO regulations that are now set up. As I'm sure you're aware, we left EASA, we left Europe, and for us that meant leaving EASA. So we're now under the regulation of the ICAO, which is obviously the international regulations. So there's quite a lot of different roles that people have to do out there, and a lot of them in the department that I work in are out and about and visiting some of the commercial jets, some of the private jet organisations. We have to go out to them between 1 and every 3 years to make sure that they are all doing what they should be doing in a safe and efficient way. Here today to talk about the experience we've had with Acudemy is that we have a lot of technical people who sometimes, from a personal skills, lack some of that in terms of being able to have difficult conversations, challenging conversations. So technically they're really, really good, but actually on a personal level they can sometimes struggle with that skill set. And we did notice this in one particular area, and it was brought on from the COVID experience. So it wouldn't be a surprise to any of you, it's been in the papers, and I know it's affected everybody, that COVID really has hit the travel industry and certainly the aviation industry. What we've seen as a result of that as the regulator is actually some pressured and stressed relationships between us as the authority and the commercial industry, the private industry. Anybody that we kind of regulate, it's cost them a lot of money. They've lost a lot of money. They've lost a lot of business. Lots of them have made redundancies. It's really, really been a struggle for them. And actually, when we've had individual staff members still going out and having to carry out these audits through that time, the relationships certainly have been strained, and we've actually come across more challenges in dealing with stakeholders during that period of time. So what we realised from that is actually, just because we've got lots of managers in place and lots of leadership people in place, it doesn't mean that they just automatically have the skills to be able to deal with potentially conflicting situations, understanding what the needs of the stakeholders are, actually being able to have some challenging conversations that might be needed. So just as an example, to give you an idea of some of the conversations, so if somebody, for example, a flight ops inspector was to go out to an airline and audit their process, make sure they're doing everything within the safety regulation, they come across something actually that they're not doing, or that there's a gap that they're missing, they'll then address that as a finding with them. Now, obviously, if that airline or that organisation is under strain because of COVID or because of anything, being told actually you're doing something wrong and you need to fix this, otherwise there could potentially be repercussions in terms of the absolute worst case scenario, their ability to be able to fly being pulled, that just adds another pressure onto that person. So there have been a few situations where we found that's happened, and the conflict in terms of delivering that message from our perspective and it being received has been a really key thing that's been highlighted. So we approached Acudemy about delivering some training, actually initially to all of our, to the airworthiness department. So they will deal with the surveying of aircraft and the maintenance organisations that look after all of the aircraft that we all fly on. So There was about 15 of them, a leadership member who oversaw them, and then all team managers. So what we did is actually we did a course of them. So we did a 2-day course that Acudemy delivered. Katrina came and delivered it in our office, which again was the first time a lot of people had been together for quite a while, because we'd all been working remotely. A lot of strong personalities in that room, which she handled really well. And actually, the key thing for us was identifying with some people that actually, even though we're a regulator, we are still there to deliver a service. And that is a challenge in our organisation, and it has been a challenge for some time, and I think it will continue to be. We have some people that work for us who are very, I'm the regulator, you must do as, and actually sometimes forget there's a service element. So we are still here to provide a service. So it's a very fine line, and I think it's about trying to understand what that line is. And actually the 2-day training course that we had really helped people see that. It helped people look at themselves in terms of their listening skills, how to handle conflict, how to manage expectations. And actually, I think probably we often go to courses and we go, actually, it's not going to teach me anything new. Actually, everybody that attended that course came out and said, actually feel more confident now to go back out into industry, because I think it was starting to impact people's confidence in terms of having to have difficult conversations and not wanting that conflict. Not that anybody wants that conflict, but sometimes it happens just by the nature of what role it is you're doing. So that was kind of the course for us, and there was about 15 people that attended that over a 2-day. And once we finished that course, Yusuf and I had a chat about, okay, where do we go from here? And actually, because of the success, what we are now doing, and I think the first session is in June, is we're rolling out another 5 courses to the remaining leadership team members in the other areas and their management teams, which is probably about 50 people in total, to make sure that actually everybody has got those skills, everybody can always learn something new, and actually it's not just that pocket in airworthiness that we've found that there's stakeholder issues. Actually, it's across the whole of the organisation, and in particular the safety and airspace regulation group, where we are on a daily basis in communications with stakeholders. So actually from our perspective, it's been brilliant in terms of just giving all of our colleagues some additional support, helping them understand skills, and actually probably having to take a look at themselves in terms of how they deal with conflict. Are they an active listener? What's their body language like? What's their tone? Are they making eye contact? All of the small bits of detail, but which are crucial actually when you're even if it's on the phone or in an in-person meeting. So we have had really positive feedback from the group that have done it. So it will be great to see what feedback we get once everybody else has gone through that course. And then I guess after we've done that, we will look at, do we now need to push this out to the rest of our colleagues? Because obviously it's not just managers and leadership team. There's a lot of colleagues who actually just go out on a day-to-day basis and are dealing with stakeholders, even internally and externally. So yeah, we are doing it in stages, and I think it's one of those things. As an organisation, we are changing, and COVID has made us change for the better in many ways. And I think it has highlighted actually where we've got some gaps. So, even as part of our interview process now, we're looking at, how can people manage conflicting situations, behaviours. It's not all about technical ability. So it is becoming more of a predominant thing in terms of how we deal with stakeholders and we manage those relationships, because it's as much about our success as it is theirs. So that's just a brief overview of kind of the course that we had and why so before COVID, the roles that I've just talked about in terms of people going out and auditing aircraft, auditing companies or surveying aircraft. Now those roles were what we would call remote working roles anyway. So we probably had about 50% of our workforce would do those roles. So they would maybe come into the office once every few weeks, but actually their contract was essentially a remote working contract. The ones that are in the office, obviously slightly different. So we have experienced probably, it's a wellbeing issues more than anything else, which I'm sure everybody's probably aware of, from different angles, in terms of that isolation and being at home. So our office has just gone through a complete redesign to make it hybrid friendly, so hot desking, and I only opened about 3 weeks ago. So there's lots of things as an organisation we're now doing to encourage people to come back in. Now, we haven't, as an organisation, said you must do 2 days or you must do 3 days. We've kind of at the moment left it up to people to decide what they want to do, whilst pushing the positives of being in a relation, in a office environment in terms of what that gives you, as opposed to continue working at home. So I think for us, because we weren't fully office anyway, that transition has probably not impacted us as much. And actually the departments where they were all office space, they actually are in 2 days a week. That's the requirement for them. So because we had quite a lot of remote workers anyway, it's probably been a bit more of an easy transition.
And in terms of like, how do you guys manage sort of engagement in terms of like communication when you're remote working and for the guys in the office? Is there a particular tool or resource you guys use?
Yeah, so we use Teams, we use SharePoint from a communications perspective, and obviously there's a lot of meetings that are held. So like any organisation, we have a lot of meetings, lots of check-ins. So that communication, I guess, from the day that we've all had to work from home, all of those tools have been put in place for us. So yeah, we're really lucky from an IT perspective. We're fully supported. So I mean, it's been managed by a PDC, is what we call it. So the personal development. It's like a half yearly check that we have on our deliverables, and so it's been monitored via that with their direct manager. But also we do something in my department called Stakeholder Engagement surveys. So we actually go out to our stakeholders independently from the teams that actually work directly with them, and we complete a survey process with them, and we do that over the phone. So it's not just something we send out and they just fill out. It's actually a conversation that we will have with them, and normally it's about the recent audit they've had done, or some recent interaction they've had with colleagues. So what we do is we ask them 18 questions, and quite a few of those questions are about their inspector or their surveyor, the CAA, the communications, and actually we're using that as a tool to gather feedback about how we're coming across, because it was actually we were doing these before the training happened, and it's some of the feedback we were getting also fed into why we needed to do this, and actually why we need to roll it out across the rest of the safety and airspace regulation group, because we are getting some feedback. We have had some feedback from stakeholders saying, I don't feel like my inspector listens to me, it's their way or the highway, lots of stuff that's not service orientated. So yeah, it's a bit of an uncomfortable feeling sometimes amongst our own staff colleagues that we're going out and getting the feedback, because it's quite a new thing, probably something we've only done in the last few years. But actually, the customer has to have a voice, and whilst there has to be some of it where you have to take with a pinch of salt, because there are people that if you give them that platform, they will absolutely tell you everything that's wrong and nothing that's right. But there is certainly a theme that has come across in the last few years that, we seem to be too much regulator and not enough customer service orientated. So that's some of the metrics we're using in terms of, actually, are we any better? And we are. And actually, where we have stakeholder reviews, these aren't dragging on to become big issues that then get escalated to the CEO. They're being dealt with within the departments that they're actually happening in, which is a positive sign, because you never want it to go escalated to the CEO. So they're the metrics, I guess, in terms of how people feel. It's being measured through the PDC process for us. But again, I think the stakeholders are the ones to tell us whether it's working or not, as much as the individual. So I mean, from a pay perspective, we, like everybody else, I think we've been under pay freeze for a number of years now, and I think where industry are now trying to get back up on their feet, and you'll have seen in the news about the airports, they can't recruit people quick enough, and the airlines, they're offering stuff that we probably can't match in some areas, which is an issue that we're facing at the moment. But yeah, it's higher than it normally is, and I think there's a multitude of different reasons for that. But again, a lot of the people that we've had at CAA, that are CAA, have been there quite a long time. So yeah, there is the turnover is there, But we have had people, I work with people that have been there 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, 15 years. So on the whole, there's people that have been there quite a long time.